In this video, we're going to talk about the basic syntax for HTML and CSS, see the differences between them. So first of all, let's figure out what syntax means. And you probably know this word from, just thinking about language in general, but it has a special meaning when it comes to computer language. So these are the conventions of a coding language, that is the grammar, if you will, that signals the language and allows it to encode properly. So these are the distinctive features for coding in a specific language, and different languages have different syntax. It includes both the specific sort of commands or functions, or in HTML's case, tags, as well as any punctuation that goes along with it. And we'll talk about that. You'll see that in some examples. So HTML syntax, the signals, the signs that allow you to know immediately that you're dealing with HTML are when you see these features. If you see tags surrounded in angle brackets, you know you're dealing with HTML or one of its cousins like XML, but we're sticking with HTML, that's what we're learning. And the forward slash, this also shows the just plain old angle brackets is the beginning, and forward slash plus tag is the end of where a tag operates on a HTML, on a rendered HTML page. So let's look at an example. And again, this includes the tag plus the punctuation of these angle brackets, right? So here's a nice paragraph of text. P is the tag that signals a paragraph to the browser as it's encoding. The angle brackets here lets it know that this is where the paragraph is starting. Then angle brackets plus forward slash lets it know, plus the P, of course, again, lets the browser know this is where the paragraph ends. So notice that what is contained in here between the beginning and the end is what is going to be rendered as the paragraph on the page. You might also have things like properties inside of a tag. In this case, this is an image tag, and it has an alt property that's just basically going to describe the image, and that would read out for a screen reader, for example. And in this case, it's just a decorative image, which screen readers can be set to skip. So this is another way, another type of way you might see an HTML line. It's also valid, has a tag, and the image tag, we'll talk about that later, is one of the few single tag. It doesn't have an end tag the same way P does and the way most tags do. So we'll talk about the difference between single tags and then tag sets of various types. Okay, so that gives us a sense when you see the angle brackets and the slashes, and when you can have properties within, but angle brackets and slashes, you should immediately be thinking HTML. All right, what about CSS? CSS looks a little bit different. It is a distinctive language, but they work closely together, so we're going to learn them together. So CSS syntax, when you see these curly brackets, that's a sure sign you're dealing with CSS. When you see colons before attribute lists and semicolons at the end of assigned values, that's a sure sign you're dealing with CSS. So notice here you've got a tag. Again, we recognize that. We just talked about P. So we know that that's a HTML paragraph tag, but in this case, we're using P in the context of CSS, and that curly bracket lets us know. And what we're doing is assigning, we're formatting the alignment, the text align, and we're going to make it a centered paragraph in this case, right? So if this were in our CSS code, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, all of the paragraphs on the page would be center aligned. And here, the value center is after the colon. That's the value of this particular property. And then the semicolon lets the browser know that that's the end of this statement, and then it waits for the next statement in terms of its rendering. So really remember those semicolons at the end of lines, because if you leave them off, that can kind of halt your whole rendering. So remember, precision is the way to go with these. You will also find different selectors in CSS. So for example, A is the HTML tag for an anchor or an HTML link, and it has a few different states, including hover. And so by writing it like this, it's saying that this code, whatever CSS code I'm going to put in here, only applies to links when I'm hovering over them with the mouse. And you know, we'll see as we go along how that kind of works. There's selectors based on the ID of a element. There's selectors like this, where it could be the first of type. So the first time the TD appears in your HTML page, it would get whatever code you put in here. And don't worry about what TD is, you'll learn it. And here, things like this, nth child even. What this would do is, if you've got a whole bunch of TRs on your page, TRs that are all together, and TR is just a table row, it would make every other one, the even numbered ones, have whatever code you put in here. You can also create custom classes, and you identify those by putting a dot in front of it. Now, don't worry if all of this stuff doesn't quite make sense yet. We're going to learn it all, but I just wanted to give you a sense of how, of the types of things you might see in CSS, just so visually you can recognize when you're taking a look at stuff that's got curly brackets, colons, semicolons, even things like hashtag, or, you know, old people like me say pound signs, and selectors like this, then you're dealing with CSS.